Hi! Welcome to this part of my review featuring the Midnight Legacy of Darkness Dungeons & Dragons 5e campaign setting. If you haven't seen the other parts of my review, featuring this world where evil has taken over completely and being good is considered a sin, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we are going to talk about the dawn of the Second Age. The scribe calendar of the Elven Court marks the end of the First Age with the Battle of Three Kingdoms in 5133. It opens the Second Age with the short-lived period of peace and intercultural trust known to Dornish scholars as the Years of Unity. For more than 2 centuries, the peoples of Eredain lived in harmony. Their economies flourished as they expanded their frontiers and trade grew accordingly. But then the Sarkazan invasion occurred. In the year 230 of the Second Age, a new threat to Eredain arrived from the Dornish homeland across the sea. The Sarkazans, lean, wiry humans with deep brown skin and black hair from the continent of Peluria, landed a series of large invasion fleets in southern Eredain. More than 1400 years earlier, Sarkazans had driven the Dorns from Peluria with steel weapons and cavalry warcraft. They were a people with a long history of conquest and had been powerful enough to defeat the warlike Dorns. In Eredain, the invading Sarkazans quickly established a number of fortified settlements from which would eventually grow the great cities of Hallisport, Cambriel, and Sharud. When the Sarkazans began to cut and burn trees in Erethor, Aradil's army again went to war. The battle lines stretched along the southern borders of the forest, and for almost a century, the elves of Erethor held off the invaders. In 318 SA, at the Battle of Pethurid, elven sorcerers assassinated the 5 Sarkazan generals commanding the assault, allowing the Fey infantry to crush the attacking army. Realizing that these strange forest dwellers were unbeatable within the trees and would not be drawn from them, emissaries from the Sarkazan lords sued for peace with the elves of Erethor. By the end of the year, hostilities had ceased, though for many years after, Aradil kept a standing army on the southern borders of Erethor. Groups of halflings and gnomes began limited trade with the Sarkazans that eventually grew into solid relationships that would spare them war with the invaders. The first dwarves the Sarkazans met were the fierce mercenaries who had fought alongside the elves of Erethor. As a result, when the Sarkazans eventually encountered the dwarven clanholds in the mountains of the east, they were rightly cautious. After a few tense years and the occasional skirmish, it became clear that the Sarkazans had no hope of taking the mountains, and they left them to the stout Fey. The Dornish clans knew the Sarkazans had designs on the rich lands of their kingdoms. They also knew their failure to stand with their one-time allies meant that they could expect no help from the Fey. That is, the Dornish did not support the elves or the dwarves in their encounters with the Sarkazans. Ultimately, the Dornish kingdoms were defeated by the Sarkazans in this new land. The Sarkazan colonial lords, though victorious, had not broken the honor of the Dorns, and were impressed with their steadfast courage and warrior nobility. Since coming to Eredain, they had learned it was wiser and more profitable to make allies than to subjugate enemies. When the Sarkazan War ended in 853 SA, the colonial lords offered the Dornish monarchs the retention of their lands and titles in exchange for oaths of fealty. For more than 200 years, the old Sarkazan Empire, far to the east, took tribute from the colonial lords in Eredain. As the years passed, however, the lords began to chafe under this yoke. A war of rebellion was joined, but this time the heartland of Eredain and the Fey were spared. An alliance of colonial Sarkazans and the Dorns waged the bloody sea war against the old Sarkassan Empire. The old empire was simply too distant to respond quickly enough to the changes during wartime, and so the old empire relinquished its attempts to claim the colonies of Eredain. When the war ended, a great meet was held, called the Conclave of Rulers. At this gathering, the Sarkassan Caliph accepted the fealty of the Dornish monarchs and founded a unified nation, the Kingdom of Erenland. Alliance and intermarriage gave rise to royal families that could trace their lineages to both the Sarkassan nobility and the great houses of the Dornish clans. For almost 800 years, the people of Eredain lived in peace. Humans settled throughout the Heartland, building countless towns and villages, even homesteading far to the north of the Sea of Peluria, in lands once held by Isrador's forces. However, quietly, Aradil kept a lonely vigil against the north. The start of the Second War with Isrador happened in the year 1920 SA. It began with dozens of small attacks carried out by orcs and ruthless bands of humans on horseback all along the northern frontier. Many fronts formed across the frontier, and the defenders were spread thin. Aradil's soldiers fought a stealthy woodland war, as Isrador's orcs and their minions pushed deep into northern Erethdor, burning the forest as they advanced. No single battle came near the level of carnage and destruction of the Battle of Three Kingdoms in the first war against Isrador. But there were far more battles, and in the end, they took a much greater toll on the lands of Eredain. The foul magics cast against Eredain's defenders during the Second War were far more subtle and ultimately more effective than they had been in the first. Weather-based attacks, diseases, and glamours of mistrust and fear almost broke the defenders completely. In the year 1948 SA, the outcome of the war balanced on the edge of a knife. Then everything seemed to be lost, as flights of ancient dragonkind allied with the evil will of Isrador. Then, when defeat was all but certain, a warm southern gale heralded the arrival of victory. Another host of raging dragons unexpectedly appeared across the many fronts and fiercely joined battle against their treacherous kin. The physical and magical destruction the dragons wrought as they attacked and counterattacked was almost as great as that from the rest of the war combined. Death was everywhere, and chaos was absolute. When it was over, both sides were broken. Isrador's armies had once again scattered to the north, and the only dragons to be found were the broken bodies of their dead. And this concludes this part of the review. In the next part, we are going to talk about the dawn of the Third Age, and the Last Age as well. As you can see, the battles become more and more intense, and more ominous. While the peoples of Eredain have been suffering losses with all of those conflicts concerning the new arrivals to the land, Isrador becomes increasingly more dangerous. More beings turn to his side, and his magics become stronger with each passing year. Thank you for watching this part of the review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending right through RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.